All right, good evening, everyone. Welcome back to the E3 Coliseum for our final session of day 2, and this is a really special one. 2018, we're halfway through the year, and two things in entertainment have really affected pop culture in a big way, and we're excited to have some of the creative visionaries behind both of those with us. Of course, Fortnite. How many Fortnite fans in the house? All right. Fortnite has become an absolute phenomenon. I've worked in games for over 2 decades, and I've never seen a game take over pop culture like this so rapidly. So we're excited that Donald Mustard, the worldwide creative director at Epic Games, is here. Donald's been making games for decades, but of course, Fortnite is what everyone's talking about now. And we have a very special guest joining us as well. Avengers Infinity War. Anyone see that, maybe? Well, we're so honored that the director of that film, along with his brother, Joe Russo, is here. And in addition to being a big fan of video games, of course, Donald and Joe worked together very recently on a little special crossover event between Fortnite and Avengers that we'll talk about, and everything else related to games, technology, and storytelling in 2018. So please join me in welcoming Donald Mustard and Joe Russo.
Hey, everyone.
See you, man?
Hey, how are you?
Man, what's up? Well, first of all, welcome to E3, Joe.
Great to be here.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I'll kick this off with, everyone knows that Donald is a longtime video game developer and fan. When this event happened with the crossover, I think everyone was amazed, wow, you wouldn't know the Russo brothers are into video games. Tell us, what do you play? What's your history? What's sort of the world of games?
I'm a pop culture junkie. I grew up reading comics, playing video games. I had Atari, I had television, I had Nintendo. I was a kid that my parents would come down, put me to bed, and then they'd come down at 3 in the morning, get a glass of water, and they'd find me playing Space Invaders on Atari. So I moved into Ultima when I got an Apple IIc. So some old school, some OG references, but and inspirations. So I've been playing games for years. I had when Call of Duty was the thing years ago. I had a big screen installed in my house so that I could get as immersive as possible. I'd sit 5 feet from the screen, thinking that would help me beat some 15-year-old playing me somewhere else in the world, and it never helped. So then, obviously, I got into Fortnite with everybody else because I've got 4 kids, and they started talking about it, and I said, I got to sit down and play this, and then I got sucked in. My son and I play all the time together. So
Amazing. Well, yeah, it's become such a phenomenon. Donald, tell us a bit about Fortnite from your perspective, because you've been, again, making games, chair, Salt Lake City for so many years, and then, joined the Epic family. And, I think a year ago at E3, we were talking about, Fortnite, and it was here, but, it was one of the many games at E3. Here we are a year later. It is such a phenomenon. From your perspective, having made games for so many years, what has it felt like to sort of see, it cross over, not just to gamers, but as Joe said, kids, families around the world, women, men, everyone is playing Fortnite.
I think it's been the most humbling thing ever. To see something catch fire like this, and to be so popular and to cross so many boundaries is astounding, and no one could have predicted it, right? I think at the end of the day, we're always just trying to make really cool games that are really fun, that can delight people and bring them joy, and so it's been really cool, and we just try every day to say, how can we entertain people, and how can we make them happy? And so it's just humble. It doesn't even feel real.
Well, and what I love about Fortnite is it never ends. You were teasing me last night. It's wait until you see what happens in a few weeks here or there, and it's every week it feels like there's something new happening. And
there's cool stuff coming. It's cool.
Anything to share?
Nope. You'll see. The game will speak for itself.
Will evolve over time.
Right.
But what I love is that you're doing sort of serialized storytelling with the game. And Joe, you're obviously in the middle of a a story that we're going to have the conclusion of, I guess, next year. But I want to talk a bit about that idea of stories that don't just exist in, kind of a linear box where it's sort of like it just happens, but now, cinematic universes, right? And in many ways, Fortnite is its own, gaming universe that has this sort of extended storytelling. And I want to ask you guys, in this day and age, is that what you think audiences want? Is they want these sort of stories that, can persist over time?
I think narrative is at the core of human existence, and it has been since the dawn of man. I mean, we crave narrative, we crave storytelling. You can find narrative in anything. You can find narrative in a 6-second Vine. No longer exists, but you used to be able to find narrative in a 6-second Vine. So I think that the more compelling the narrative, the more compelling the point of view, the stronger the emotional connection from the audience, and that can be in a game, it can be in a film, and I think world building is a huge part of that because that's attention to detail. Yeah. It is it's creating emotional investment, intellectual investment, and if it's compulsive or propulsive, it's going to drive you towards a climax. And I think that every battle royale is a narrative that that you're trying to get yourself into the third act of. Yeah. And that's what's so addictive about it.
Yeah, that's one interesting thing is Fortnite. It is about this this world where you're sort of the author of your own experience. And yes, there are characters, but a lot of Fortnite I think is about the battle bus and the feel of the universe and allowing people to sort of tell their own stories. So Donald, maybe we could talk about that, of the idea of players creating their own narrative versus a more traditional kind of linear narrative, and how you think about that interplay.
Oh, I think it's interesting because I agree with you. I think that humans have been telling stories since probably the first fire was ever made. And that first night, people probably gathered around the fire, and someone was like, "So I was out in the woods, and there was a shape in the dark." And I heard a noise, right? And then that started to build this propulsion of a thing, right? And I think that you often you find the story in the telling of the story. And last night we were talking, and I was telling Joe the story of season 5 of Fortnite, like what none of you are going to hear.
I know it all.
And he was telling you about the next
because I know that you can keep a secret, right? No, but even in telling that story, like the telling of that, you're finding it in the telling of it, because you can start to read the beats and the emotion, and so much of it is that live reaction.
How is it, by the way? What do you think of season 5?
Well, he saw my face. I mean, again, I think that one of the core elements of narrative is surprise, and it's certainly surprising. And I think that that's the best thing about what's going on in the world right now. And I think that narrative is changing faster than it ever has. Just speaking from my perspective of being a filmmaker, two-dimensional, 2-hour storytelling has had an incredible 100-year run. I think that's going to end pretty soon. And I can't say whether that's going to be in 5 years or 10 years, but I do know this, is that I have 4 kids ranging in age from 12 to 21, and I watch their habits, and they're radically different than any habits I've ever seen. Yeah. And I think that like their desire to go to a movie theater and watch something collectively in 2 dimension, they don't have that same emotional connection that I did when I went to it with my father, and I have memories of that that then make it an event for me because it's built into my psyche and my my subconscious. They don't have that. Yeah. They don't mind watching stuff on their phones while they're on their computer and absorbing content in very facile ways, and they're looking for innovation. I think that this is a really innovative time. And I think that what you're seeing with Fortnite and its explosion is this dialogue that it's creating around the world, a space, a collective space, where people can play together, talk about playing together, watch each other playing. And like you said, Donald, it's a narrative that unfolds that you create. It's immersive. And I do think ultimately that's where we're headed, is immersion. I think, AR is going to, alter the world very shortly.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think that the kind of the advent of some of these new technologies combined with it's this new language we're going to have to learn. Like how do we start to shape narrative in a setting, in a world that embraces agency at its core? That the agency of the viewer is also the author of that. And how do you kind of shape and mold that experience?
Yeah. So Joe, when you say something provocative like that about 5-10 years, the traditional 2-hour theatrical feature might be gone. When you look at now what's happening with Fortnite, I mean, are there ways, do you think, that film or linear storytelling needs to adapt or can sort of combine with interactive to keep it relevant?
We'll always crave the structure of a story told by someone else, right? Yeah, but there is also the experience of telling your own story and discovering your own story in a universe that's been created for you to discover it in. I do think that, I think VR is an immersive experience. I've played games on it where I've had I don't know if you guys had this experience, but where I've had to take it off after a half hour because I was like, this is getting too intense for me. I mean, it's a very complicated emotional experience that you're having. I think that there are limitations to VR because you have to be in a room where you're not going to split your head on the wall when you trip, when you're doing something crazy. You're tethered right now, so when the text slims up, it may become a more effective means of storytelling. Yeah. I think AR, because when we can get Google Glass the size of Donald's glasses, you can go out and curate your existence. So this gentleman here he loves cats. So he's sitting in the audience looking up at us, and he's programmed into his Google Glass that he sees cats everywhere he goes in his life. So there's a cat here, and there's a cat there. Or, I'm a Marvel fanatic. I can have breakfast every morning with Tony Stark through my Google Glass. He can sit right across the table from me and occasionally say some, programmed content. Yeah. That is curating a life experience, and that's where I think, narrative will start to evolve into this weird merger between your everyday existence and fantasy.
So then I, imagine narrative starts to flex into the spot where, it's AI, it's procedurally generated in a way. It becomes, in many ways, more like a game where you're setting up a set of rules and circumstances, but many different things everyone can have a different experience.
I think that's what's exciting is that, over the last 100 years, there's been just a lot of work and innovation in figuring out how to tell those two-dimensional linear stories in a very compelling, emotional way. And over the last, 30, 40 years or so, there's been a different group experimenting with non-linear world building, right? And I think that both of those sets of pioneers have learned different but complementary languages. And I think that over the next 50 to 100 years, there's going to be a new hybrid language formed that will be exciting and awesome, and like, what a time to be alive. Like, we all get to be alive in the age of this convergence of this awesome thing that's going to happen.
Is there anything that, Joe is able to do as a film director that you're envious of as a game maker?
Oh, like a billion things.
Okay.
Like, you can have a close-up with a real human. Yeah. Like, that's the power of just eyes. Right. I wish I could have an actual human with eyes that could just emote, right? Like, so. Yeah.
And on your side, Joe, I mean, when you look at something like Fortnite and you see what's there, I mean, what excites you? What do you I assume it inspires you in some ways when you're thinking of your films, but is there anything there that you say, like,
I think the most fascinating thing that Donald's doing is evolving the game through narrative, that it's changing constantly, that surprises are being thrown at you so that the landscape changes, and you have to adjust, and you have to adjust your gameplay, and you have to adjust to the story. And I think that that is part of what I was saying about innovation. That's a very innovative concept, is that you said it last night, is that the island is the character. It's the main character of the game. And as the island adjusts and shifts and things happen, that like the comet, there's adjustments in your gameplay and the way that you approach it, and then that drives conversation. I would argue that right now, if you look at the market, whether it's anything in media, if it's working, it's driving a conversation. I think that now that we have a collective way to communicate with each other through social media, that the things that are popping are driving the highest conversations in the social media space.
Yeah. Well, and now you've seen it with a lot of the online content creators. When you guys drop new content, you talk to some of the folks here this week at E3, and they're like, I love Fortnite so much because every week it gives me new content to talk about and to share with my audience and create a story on their own. And then, all the Let's Plays, the same thing. It's like someone in this game telling their own story. They're sharing that video on Twitter. It's their unique content that you're giving them the tools to author their own story. So where does that...
It's kind of creating the campfire, right?
Yeah, and where do you think that goes down there? Obviously, right now, Epic is setting up the rules of, the island, the story. But you think of, a master storyteller like someone like Joe. I mean, are there ways for people like Joe and other creators to come in and help, tell their own stories or set up their own islands, or where do you think this sort of goes?
Well, I mean, this is the wild experiment, right?
Yeah.
I think the hypothesis is you could try something like this, and I think this is the interesting thing. And I don't know, I would love to get your viewpoint on this. Like, this is not with film and with games. It's not the same authorial control that, say, maybe like a novelist has when they write a book. Like, I am one teeny piece of a massive puzzle, right? Where there's all these 1,000 puzzle pieces make up the people that make Fortnite, and there's probably thousands, at least many hundreds of people contribute to a film on the scale of Avengers, yeah. Right? Thousands, yeah. And every one of those pieces is critical. Like, if you look at a whole puzzle put together and there's 2 or 3 pieces missing, it's not the puzzle.
Right.
And so I'm just a teeny piece. And it's because all those other pieces are so effectively working to make this puzzle that it's actually a thing that's awesome. Mm-hmm. And that changes how you have to approach it as well, right? Because you need everyone to be lifting to do this thing. And so the magic of that is when you get all these people that are so trying to make sure that their part of the puzzle piece is as perfect as possible, magic can happen, right? Because my core belief, and I bet yours is too, is that what the collective we can do together is way better than what the individual voice can accomplish. And so that's the hypothesis going into Fortnite, is that all the other pieces of the puzzle are you, right? All the players, all the people engaging in it. And it was like, what if? And I don't think we would have been brave enough to try this in any other game I've worked on, at least, right? It was after Fortnite had started to become this huge thing that we're like, what if? What if we put a comet in the sky? Yeah. What happens? Yeah. Right? What happens if 125 million people start to realize this is a thing? And as that plays out, and I think it's gotten us a lot closer to that campfire, where, and this is the thing you probably wish you had. I can more closely than ever, I can be at that campfire, seeing people's reactions.
Evolving, you can iterate time, yeah.
Right? And as I see it, I can be like, okay, I'm going to add this piece in. I'm going to tell this a little differently. What if we try this? And again, this might all fail spectacularly, right? We've only done it once.
No, but the fact that you can iterate that quickly, because sometimes, the film, you're always tweaking, adding scenes, thinking about, what's the end credits scene going to be, et cetera, but like with you, it's almost daily. I was asking you last night, it's sort of, how far ahead do you plan? And like, you might have ideas, but if people respond negatively to something you do, that may affect what you're doing. I think that rapid iteration daily, that must be something, Joe, on your end, somewhat envious of too, that these guys can tweak things so quickly in these digital living worlds.
Certainly, it's just, it's similar in that, the Marvel Universe is a narrative that's playing out over 10 years, and typically, we release a film, we can see the audience reaction to the movie, and that will then inform the next film that gets made in a year or two. Yeah.
And is that true? Is there actually stuff that you tweak?
I think it's not necessarily tweaking. It's so much as like understanding and taking in what affected them.
Yeah.
What thematics they responded to, emotionally what they found in the film.
When you're doing these two back to back,
we had no idea that. I loved Peter Parker as a character growing up. I was on set directing that scene with him and Tony Stark at the end of the film, and I'm tearing up. So I knew I would be emotionally impacted. I had no idea if the audience was going to be as impacted as I was, and it becomes a thing. So then, that's something that goes into our brains as we're evolving the next narrative and saying, this is an important piece of information that really affected the audience for whatever reason. The whole as it came together, led to a moment that became a thing for them.
Does that help tweak like next year's film because you see the reaction and it's like, or do you sort of have to say like, hey, we had these two, so it's further out, like,
we make adjustments as we go, no question. It's a unique situation with Avengers 3 and Avengers 4 because we shot them back to back, so we had to conceive them. So it's probably the first time that we didn't have that gestation period where we could take in what the audience felt and how they responded. But we're always evolving and assessing, and part of what we do that I think is similar to what Donald does about evolving the game is, we go do pickups and tweak pieces as we go. We do have that flexibility to make assessments and adjustments in a way that we can try to maximize the narrative for the audience.
Sure,
and not dissimilar to what you're doing like on a weekly basis as you're assessing and changing the story.
No, I think that makes sense because I'm sure just, again, a lot of times you find the story in the telling of it, right? Which is, I'm sure when you're filming that scene, you're like, oh, this is resonating in a certain way, and that could affect the music you decide to put on it, or the way when you edit out that shot, or so there's all you have all these awesome tools to do it. So it's fun stuff.
You guys, I gotta say, when you announced this collaborative event of these sort of two worlds colliding, I think everyone was like, I can't believe this happened. This is so cool. Tell us a little bit about the behind the scenes of, making this happen. How did that happen? Because again, like every fan was like, this is amazing, but we can't believe that,
I stalked him. I hunted him down.
Is that true though? Really? You just
no, it is. Yeah. I was.
So how do you find Donald Mustard?
It's easy.
Tweet.
I had Disney do it.
Okay.
I picked up the phone one day and said, we got to track down Donald. I want to talk to him.
Yeah.
I had this idea.
And what was the idea?
There. And the idea initially was like, and everything that I do is based on the 12-year-old inside me that read comics and played video games and how I felt about those stories and what I wanted to see from them. So the stories that we tell in Marvel are based on what I liked when I read them and how they impacted me. Same thing with video games. So in my mind, you take chocolate and peanut butter, you put them together, and that's like crazy town. So I figured if we could get Marvel somehow into Fortnite, that the 12-year-old in me would lose their mind. So that was really how it all started.
So you get the call from Joe saying, hey, let's put the Avengers inside Fortnite in some way. I mean, was Thanos always the idea?
So I don't even know if I told you this. So I'm not making this up. Like that morning, I'd been so busy with Fortnite, I'd been putting off, like I had to go to the dentist to just like get my teeth cleaned. And at my dentist, they had like a TV screen, and I was watching Winter Soldier, like, which is another movie that Joe directed. I'm watching Winter Soldier, and I'm like, man, I love this movie so much. I can't wait for Avengers to come out in like 3 weeks. It's gonna be so awesome. And that's what it was. It was 3 weeks before Avengers came out. And so that night when you called, I'm like, am I in some alternate? I couldn't even believe it, right? Yeah. Like, 'cause I'm such a huge fan. Yeah. And so, no, I mean, we started talking. I think we talked for an hour and a half, 2 hours, just that first night. And by the end of it, I don't know, it felt authentic. It's what you were just saying. Like the kid in me too was like, this is what I would want. If I was playing the game, if there was what's the best version of the world, it would have been that there was some cool way that Thanos could come into Fortnite and just, stay forever.
That's not the announcement today. No, so I think, the fact that you said this was 3 weeks before the film came out is just like shocks me because it happened. What was it like?
That's how fast he was able to move. It really started.
It was all of it. It was everyone.
Just a creative conversation about, what could it be?
Yeah.
And I had probably, the most superficial idea of like skins or something.
Right.
Donald was like, I think we could do something even more interesting than that. Like, tell me a little bit about the movie, what's going on in the film. And
where's my screening? It's just like
now you see what it really was.
Yeah. Exactly.
But it, again, as a storyteller, the point of view of Infinity War is Thanos' point of view, and a lot of the key narrative moments in the movie turn on his character arc. And he saw that as a great way in to say, why don't we bring that character who's kind of getting his own movie into Fortnite, and then it just started evolving. Then you thought about, you gestated on it for a couple days. Yeah. You called and said, "What about this?" And really just used me as a sounding board to make sure that it was germane to what we were doing in the film. But he, literally over like 3 days, he came up with the whole concept of, how Thanos could function in the world of Fortnite.
And that's just amazing to me that you guys can turn that quickly. Just sort of say, like, here's
well, again,
a great idea.
it's an army of amazing developers, because it's not just me. Like everyone at Epic is just huge fans of Marvel and of Avengers and of you guys, and so like it was just a whole bunch of people.
But just
let's just do it. No, it was
legal,
it was
like just getting that done in that period.
It was
of time
crazy.
Was fascinating
like it was just a whole bunch of people, and I don't want to call it specifically. Maybe one of our developers, like he was like, I'm like, do you want to go for this? And he's like, do I want to go for this? And he literally lifts up his shirt, and he has this huge Infinity Gauntlet tattoo on his back. He's like, oh, I'm ready. I've been ready. And Rob, and we just started cranking, right? And it was a whole just effort of all these people. It was a love letter to Fortnite, to the fans, to the movies, to the comics we grew up with, and I hope you guys could feel that. When it came out, right?
Oh, amazing. Yeah.
And that's the other cool thing too. This wasn't like there was no money exchanging hands, no weird stuff. It was just
the two of us on a phone going, hey, let's do something really cool.
Let's do something cool.
That hopefully people are going to get excited about, and that the kids in us would be excited about.
Yep. So, something like that happens, I think. You tell me, but the reaction, at least in terms of engagement and everything with it, was off the charts, right? It seems like the fans really responded to it. As someone was saying, it's like, we want more. So when you guys look at, the idea of these interesting crossovers, I'm sure you want to protect sort of, the magic of what that was. But, Joe, when's the next crazy idea?
When's the next, what's that?
Well, when do you have the next crazy idea of what to do here? Are you excited about the idea of, not just even Marvel, but just sort of, being able to collaborate with game creators?
Absolutely. Just as a creative, that's what excites me is what can we do? It's a giant canvas that we're all part of now, and I do think that there are a lot of negatives to social media, and there's a lot of amazing positives. Some of the negatives we've seen in Facebook data and Cambridge Analytica and PsyOps and all kinds of craziness. But I think the positive is this giant collective canvas that we all have to paint on. And I think when you can take something from over here and merge it with something from over here, and it creates energy and it's dynamic and it feels organic and innovative, that you're going to get a real response. And that's because we all crave the same things. We crave, surprises and engagement.
And I imagine, Donald, that limited time nature of it is also what makes it special. It's sort of, come in, engage, and it's like as people want it back. So that's, as you think of the future, are there other sort of, crossovers or other ideas? Does that appeal to you and the team?
Yeah, I think Fortnite we're just getting started, guys. We're just getting started. I think there's so much room for, and not just even Fortnite, for games as a medium. We're all just getting started, right? Like this is. I think there's just so much room to explore and so much innovation to be had, and in the particular genre of Fortnite, oh my goodness,
a platform
it's
like that,
a blue ocean for us to go explore.
125 million players. It's as you said, it's a platform on which to tell stories now. Off the right player.
And to try all sorts of stuff.
Yeah, Joe, do you look at this and say, hey, we want to build a game? Or, what do you think of how you want to
Yeah, our whole careers, my brother and I have been trying our hand at diverse media. We've done big movies, little movies. We've done drama, comedy. We've done television. We've done half-hour TV, hour-long TV. We've done commercials. And
Arrested Development.
Yeah.
Community.
All right.
Come on. These are.
And I'm a tech head, and I like cutting-edge technology. I want to see how we can advance things. What is the next story? I grew up on films. I love them.
Yeah.
I spent a lot of my time in a movie theater, but I'm also happy to try and push that boulder over the hill that takes us on to what the next thing is. Because nothing lasts forever, and evolution is a natural part of our existence. So what is next? I want to try to help bring that to people in a way that is exciting and satisfying to them.
Amazing. Well, we're out of time. We can keep this going on for quite a while. This is fascinating, and I got to say, on behalf of everyone here, you guys have brought us both so much entertainment this year with both Avengers and Fortnite, and sounds like that you're only getting started, so we can't wait to see more. Please, Joe Russo, Donald Mustard. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Donald.
Thank you.